The autumn rain hammered against the windows of the Mystery Machine as it rolled through the fog-shrouded streets of Prosperity Heights, an old theater district that had seen better days. Inside, Scooby-Doo pressed his nose against the glass, his breath creating small circles of condensation. "Look at all those roll buildings," Scooby said, his tail wagging nervously. Daphne leaned forward from the back seat, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "According to my research, the Grandeur Theater was once the crown jewel of this district. It hosted the most elite performances in the state until it mysteriously shut down 30 years ago." "Like, mysteriously?" Shaggy gulped, clutching a half-eaten sandwich. "Man, why can't we investigate mysteriously successful pizza parlors instead?" Velma adjusted her glasses, scrolling through her tablet. "What's interesting is the financial aspect. The theater's owner, Cornelius Goldsworth, was rumored to have hidden his fortune somewhere in the building before he disappeared. We're talking about millions of dollars in cash, bonds, and rare collectibles." Fred navigated a sharp turn, his eyes focused on the road. "The current owner, Ms. Delacroix, contacted us because strange things have been happening. Mysterious figures, unexplained sounds, and now our investors are pulling out. If she can't secure funding soon, the theater will be demolished next month." "That's terrible," Daphne exclaimed. "But here's what I don't understand. Why would someone hide their fortune instead of putting it in a bank where it would earn interest?" "That's basic financial planning." "Excellent question, Daphne," Velma replied. "In the 1990s, Goldsworth didn't trust banks after several local ones failed. But hiding cash meant it couldn't grow through investments or compound interest. If he'd invested wisely, that fortune could be worth 10 times more today." Lightning flashed, illuminating the imposing facade of the Grandeur Theater ahead. Its once magnificent marquee hung crooked, letters missing like teeth in an old smile. The buildings seemed to loom over them, its dark windows like hollow eyes. "Zoinks!" Shaggy yelped as a shadow moved across one of the upper windows. "Like, did you guys see that?" Scooby whimpered, diving into Shaggy's arms. "Roast!" As they pulled up to the entrance, a blood-curdling scream echoed from within the theater, followed by an eerie, mechanical laugh that sent chills down their spines. The smell of old velvet, dust, and something else, something like burnt money, wafted through the air. The mystery had begun, and with it, lessons about wealth, investment, and the true value of financial wisdom were about to unfold. The interior of the Grandeur Theater was a monument to faded glory. Crystal chandeliers, dulled by decades of dust, hung from ornate ceilings where cherubs and muses had been painted in better times. Red velvet seats, torn and moth-eaten, stretched in rows toward a stage shrouded in heavy curtains. The smell of mildew mixed with old wood and forgotten dreams. "Wow," Daphne breathed, running her hand along the brass railing of the main aisle. "This place must have been stunning in its heyday. Just imagine the investment it took to build something like this." Miss Delacroix emerged from the shadows, an elegant woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her designer suit seemed out of place amid the decay, but her eyes held a determination that couldn't be dimmed. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice echoing through the vast space. "I'm at my wit's end. The Phantom, or whatever it is, has scared away my contractors, my investors, and even the historical society that was going to help with restoration." Fred stepped forward, notebook in hand. "Can you tell us exactly what's been happening?" "It started 3 weeks ago when we began preliminary renovations," Ms. Delacroix explained, leading them toward the stage. "Workers heard strange sounds, footsteps, whispers, and that horrible laugh. Then they started seeing him, a figure in an old-fashioned tuxedo with a grotesque mask, like tragedy and comedy combined into something nightmarish." "Rosk?" Scooby whimpered, clutching Shaggy's leg. "Like, why is it always masks?" Shaggy moaned. "Can't we investigate a mystery involving a friendly clown at a birthday party?" Velma was already examining the floor with her flashlight, her analytical mind processing every detail. "Miss Delacroix, what can you tell us about the financial situation? I understand there's some urgency." The woman's shoulders sagged. "I've invested everything I have into this project, my savings, my retirement fund, even took out loans. The plan was to restore the theater and turn it into a performing arts center, generating steady revenue from ticket sales, rentals, and events. But without investors, I can't finish the renovation. In 30 days, the bank forecloses, and the building gets demolished for a parking lot. That's a huge financial risk," Daphne observed thoughtfully. "Like putting all your eggs in one basket." "I know," Miss Delacroix admitted, "but I believed in this project. Sometimes you have to invest in your dreams. I just wish I'd kept more of an emergency fund." Velma nodded sagely. Diversification and emergency savings, two crucial principles of financial planning. Never invest more than you can afford to lose, especially in a single venture. As they talked, Shaggy had wandered toward a concession stand, his stomach overruling his common sense. "Like, man, look at these old prices. A hot dog for 25 cents. A soda for a dime." "That's inflation for you, Shaggy," Velma called out. What cost a quarter in the 1990s would cost about 60 cents today. Money loses value over time, which is why keeping it hidden instead of invested was such a poor financial decision by Goldsworth. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from backstage, followed by that mechanical, bone-chilling laugh. The curtains billowed though there was no breeze, and a shadowy figure darted across the stage. "There!" Fred shouted, pointing. "Let's go!" But as they rushed toward the stage, the old floorboards beneath Shaggy and Scooby gave way with a splintering crack. They tumbled down into darkness, their screams fading into the depths below. "Scooby! Shaggy!" Daphne cried out, rushing to the edge of the hole. From below came Shaggy's trembling voice. "Like, we're okay. But, guys, you're not going to believe what we just found down here. ... double quotes, Chapter 2. The Vault Beneath." Velma's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as the gang descended a rickety ladder into the basement. The air grew cooler and damper with each rung, carrying the scent of old paper and metal. When they reached the bottom, their lights revealed an unexpected sight. Shaggy and Scooby stood before a massive steel door built into the wall, its surface covered in intricate combination locks and mechanisms. "Zoinks! Look at this thing!" Shaggy exclaimed, his fear momentarily forgotten in the face of curiosity. "It's like something from a spy movie." Velma approached the vault door, running her fingers over the mechanisms. "Fascinating. This is a vintage Goldsworth-era vault, probably installed when the theater was built. This must be where he kept the box office receipts, and possibly his hidden fortune. But why would he need such security for a theater?" Daphne wondered aloud, examining the area around the vault. The walls were lined with old filing cabinets, and shelves held dusty ledgers and papers. Fred began photographing everything with his phone. Maybe he was protecting more than just nightly earnings. Miss Delacroix mentioned he didn't trust banks. "Exactly," Velma said, pulling out one of the ledgers and blowing dust off its cover. "Look at this meticulous financial records dating back to 1985. Goldsworth tracked every penny. Ticket sales, concession revenue, performer payments, maintenance costs. He was incredibly organized." Daphne peered over Velma's shoulder, her eyes widening as she scanned the numbers. These revenues were enormous. The theater was pulling in tens of thousands of dollars per show. If he saved even a portion of this and invested it properly, compound interest alone would have made him extraordinarily wealthy. "Compound interest?" Shaggy asked, temporarily distracted from his fear. "Like, is that when your interest earns interest?" "Exactly." Velma beamed, always happy to teach. "Let's say Goldsworth saved $100,000 in 1990. if he deinvested it with a conservative 7% annual return. By 2025, it would have grown to over $760,000 without adding a single additional dollar. That is the power of letting your money work for you instead of hiding it in a vault. Scooby scratched his head with his paw. Why did he write it? Fear, Scooby, Velma replied. Fear of losing money can sometimes lead to worse financial decisions than the risks themselves. Goldsworth was so afraid of bank failures that he opted for what he thought was the safest choice. But he actually chose one of the riskiest, keeping cash where it couldn't grow and could be stolen or destroyed. Crash! The sound of breaking glass echoed from above, followed by running footsteps. The mechanical laugh bounced off the walls, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Like, that's our cue to leave, Shaggy yelped, making for the ladder. But Daphne held up her hand. Wait! Look at this. She'd been examining the filing cabinets and pulled out a faded photograph. It showed Cornelius Goldsworth, a distinguished man with a thick mustache, standing with 4 other people in front of the theater. On the back, in faded ink, were names. The original 5 partners in prosperity. Partners? Fred said, taking the photo. Ms. Delacroix never mentioned partners. Velma was already flipping through more documents. These ledgers show something interesting. In 1994, there was a massive financial dispute. Large sums of money were being withdrawn, then deposited, then withdrawn again. And look, here's a legal document. Goldsworth was buying out his partners. Why would he do that? Daphne asked. Any number of reasons, Velma mused. Creative differences, financial disagreements, or maybe he suspected one of them of embezzlement. But buying out business partners requires significant capital. Perhaps that's why he needed access to so much cash. Another crash, closer this time. The Phantom's laugh seemed to grow louder, more aggressive. We need to get out of here and regroup, Fred decided. But first, let me check something. He examined the vault door more closely. These locks are damaged, scratched, and dented. Someone's been trying to break in recently. The Phantom? Daphne suggested. Or someone pretending to be a phantom, Velma said with a knowing look. Someone who knows about the fortune and wants it for themselves. As they climbed back up to the main floor, Scooby's keen nose picked up a scent. Riroshin, he announced, sniffing the air. Kerosene? Fred stopped, his expression grave. That's an accelerant. Someone could be planning. Fire! Shaggy shrieked, pointing toward the stage where orange flames were beginning to lick up the old curtains. The gang ran toward the exits, but the Phantom appeared at the top of the stairs, backlit by flames, its distorted mask grinning hideously. In its hands, it held what looked like stacks of old bills. The fortune belongs to the theater. The Phantom's voice boomed, distorted and mechanical. And it will die with the theater. The creature threw the money into the flames, and as the bills caught fire, the gang could only watch in horror as potential history and millions of dollars went up in smoke. Or did it? The fire department arrived within minutes, extinguishing the flames before serious structural damage occurred. As firefighters packed up their equipment, Fred gathered the gang in the mystery machine, which they'd moved to a safe distance down the street. Through the windows, they could see the theater, its facade now streaked with smoke stains that gave it an even more foreboding appearance. Okay, gang, Fred said, spreading out the photo and documents they'd salvaged on the van's table. Let's piece this together. We have a Phantom who's simultaneously trying to scare people away and trying to break into the vault. Why? Daphne tapped the photograph thoughtfully. And why burn money? That makes no sense financially. Even if you can't use old bills, they have collector's value. Unless, Velma interjected, pushing her glasses up, those weren't real bills. Did anyone notice they burned too quickly? Real currency, especially older bills with higher cotton content, doesn't ignite that easily. I think we were watching stage money props. Props? Scooby perked up. Exactly, Scooby. The Phantom wanted us to think the fortune was being destroyed, maybe to convince us to leave. But why? Shaggy, who'd been nervously eating a submarine sandwich, suddenly stopped mid-bite. Like, maybe because the real fortune is still down there and someone wants to get to it first? That's actually brilliant, Shaggy, Velma said, making Shaggy beam with pride. And I think I know who. Look at this partnership document more carefully. The 5 original partners were Cornelius Goldsworth, Margaret Chen, Robert Delacroix, Susan Price, and Thomas Bishop. Daphne's eyes widened. Delacroix? As in Miss Delacroix who hired us? Could be a relative, Fred noted. But which one? And why not mention it? Velma opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Let me check property records and inheritance documents. Meanwhile, Fred, we need to investigate those other partners. Where are they now? As Velma worked, the gang discussed the economic angle. Daphne, who'd been particularly interested in the financial aspects, brought up an important point. Let's think about motivation, she said. If the fortune is, say, $5 million in cash and collectibles from 1995, we need to consider what that's really worth today. Inflation means $5 million then is like having about $9 million in today's purchasing power. That's enough to motivate serious crime. But like, if someone just wanted the money, Shaggy pointed out, why not sneak in at night, grab it, and leave? Why all the phantom stuff? Because they need time, Fred realized. That vault isn't easy to crack. They need to scare everyone away so they can work on it without interruption. Every day the theater remains empty is another day they have to break in. Right who? Scooby asked, tilting his head. Velma looked up from her screen, her expression grim. I found something interesting. Margaret Chun passed away 5 years ago. Thomas Bishop is in a nursing home in Florida. Susan Price moved to Europe in the late 90s. But Robert Delacroix, let me guess, Daphne interrupted. He's related to Miss Delacroix? Her father-in-law, Velma confirmed. He died in 2010, but here's what's fascinating. He left everything to his son, Marcus Delacroix, who is currently, she scrolled down, listed as Ms. Delacroix's estranged husband and a contractor specializing in historical buildings. Fred stood up. We need to find out more about this Marcus. And we need to get back into that theater tonight to examine that vault more carefully. Like tonight? Shaggy squeaked. With the Phantom still there. Rith the Rantom, Scooby echoed, shaking. Daphne smiled reassuringly. Don't worry. This time, we'll have a plan. But first, let's learn something important about what we're protecting. Velma nodded, launching into teaching mode. The lesson here is about shared resources and partnership economics. When Goldsworth and his partners started the theater, they pooled their resources, a basic form of investment diversification. Each person contributed money, skills, or connections, sharing both the risks and rewards. That's actually really smart, Shaggy said. Like, if one person can't afford a pizza, but 5 people chip in, everyone gets pizza. Exactly, Velma laughed. But partnerships can fail when there's disagreement about money management, profit distribution, or direction of the business. Those financial disputes in the ledgers suggest the partners disagreed about something major, maybe how to invest profits or whether to expand. So Goldsworth bought them out to avoid conflict, Daphne concluded. But that meant taking on all the risk himself. If the theater failed, he'd lose everything. That's the opposite of diversification, and probably why he became paranoid about protecting his assets, Fred added. When you put all your eggs in one basket, you guard that basket with everything you've got. Their discussion was interrupted by a text message on Fred's phone. He frowned as he read it. It's from Ms. Delacroix. She says she found something in Goldsworth's old office journal. She wants us to come back right away. Alone? Velma asked suspiciously. After someone just tried to burn the place down? Like, this is how every horror movie starts, Shaggy moaned. But Daphne was already gathering her things. We can't ignore this. If there's a journal, it might explain where the fortune really is and who has the strongest claim to it legally. Speaking of legal claims, Velma said, that's another important lesson. Just because money is hidden somewhere doesn't mean finders keepers. The fortune would legally belong to Goldsworth's estate, which means his heirs or, if there are none, possibly the original partners' families. Anyone taking it would be committing theft. As they drove back to the theater under the cover of darkness, Scooby and Shaggy huddled together in the back, sharing a pizza for comfort. The theater loomed ahead, its darkened windows and smoke-stained facade making it look more like a haunted mansion than a place of entertainment. Okay, gang, Fred said as they parked. Let's split up. Velma and I will meet with Ms. Delacroix and examine this journal. Daphne, Shaggy, Scooby, you three search the backstage area for more clues about the Phantom. Look for anything unusual, costumes, props, or equipment that doesn't belong. Why do we always have to split up? Shaggy whimpered. Because you two have the best instincts for finding trouble, Daphne said with a smile, which means you're actually excellent at finding clues. Come on, I'll be with you. As they entered the theater through the stage door, the building seemed even more ominous at night. Emergency lights cast long shadows, and every creak of the old floorboards sounded like approaching footsteps. In Goldsworth's old office, a room behind the stage filled with awards, old posters, and theatrical memorabilia, Miss Delacroix waited with a leather-bound journal. But as Fred and Velma entered, Velma's sharp eyes noticed something. The woman's hands were shaking, and there was fresh mud on her designer shoes. Meanwhile, Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby explored the costume room backstage. Racks of old clothing, from Shakespearean doublets to 1920s flapper dresses, created a maze of fabric and shadows. Like, why are costume rooms always so creepy? Shaggy whispered, jumping at his own reflection in a full-length mirror. Daphne methodically checked each rack, looking for the Phantom's tuxedo and mask. Because they're full of disguises, Shaggy. And disguises mean deception. Scooby's nose was working overtime, sniffing around the room. Suddenly, he froze, his ears perking up. Rear, he whispered, pawing at a trunk in the corner. Inside the trunk, Daphne found something that made her blood run cold. Blueprints of the theater, with the vault's location marked in red. Next to it were modern lock-picking tools, a smoke machine, and a sound system capable of producing the Phantom's mechanical laugh. But most damning of all was a folder labeled Dallek-Goldsworth Partnership Dissolution Contested. This Phantom is real, Daphne breathed, but it's not a ghost. It's someone with a claim or a perceived claim to Goldsworth's fortune, and they're willing to destroy the theater to get it. Before she could investigate further, the lights went out completely. The mechanical laugh filled the darkness, and they heard running footsteps coming straight toward them. The Phantom had found them. Run! Daphne shouted, grabbing the folder and bolting from the costume room, with Shaggy and Scooby scrambling behind her. The Phantom's laugh echoed through the corridors, seeming to chase them through the darkness. They burst into the main theater just as Fred's voice crackled over Daphne's walkie-talkie. The journal is a fake. Get out. It's a trap. But it was too late. The theater's doors slammed shut with a heavy, final-sounding boom. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie red shadows across the rows of seats. On the stage, Miss Delacroix stood next to a figure in the Phantom costume, but the Phantom was removing its mask to reveal the face beneath. Marcus Delacroix, Velma announced, emerging from the wings with Fred. She'd put the pieces together. Miss Delacroix's estranged husband and son of Robert Delacroix, one of Goldsworth's original partners. The man tall, with graying hair and the calloused hands of someone who worked with his hands, smiled without humor. Very clever, but you're too late. While you've been playing detective, I've had people working on that vault. By now, they've opened it, and Goldsworth's fortune is being loaded into trucks as we speak." Ms. Delacroix looked genuinely shocked. "Marcus, what are you doing?" I didn't hire these kids to help you rob." "Shut up, Helen," Marcus snapped. "You were always too weak to see the bigger picture. My father was cheated out of his share of this theater. Goldsworth bought him out for pennies on the dollar, then got rich while Dad died broke. That fortune belongs to my family. But that's not how economics works," Daphne said boldly, stepping forward despite Shaggy trying to pull her back. "Your father accepted a buyout. That means he agreed to a price in exchange for giving up his share. Whether Goldsworth succeeded or failed afterward, it was no longer your father's concern. That's the nature of selling an asset. Besides," Velma added, "your claim has no legal standing. Whatever happened between your father and Goldsworth was resolved 3 decades ago. Taking that money now is just theft." Marcus laughed coldly. "Good luck proving it. By the time anyone realizes the vault is empty, I'll be in a country without extradition treaties. And this theater will burn to the ground, destroying any evidence." "Like, you'd burn down this whole building?" Shaggy gasped. "That's like totally uncool. And also illegal." Fred stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Marcus, think about what you're doing. You're about to commit arson, theft, and potentially murder if we can't get out. Is any amount of money worth that? $5 million in cash, bonds, and rare coins?" Marcus replied, Yes, it is," but Fred was smiling. "That's where you're wrong. While you were monologuing, we already called the police. They're blocking the exits from your trucks right now. And as for burning this place down," he pressed a button on his phone, "I just activated the theater's new fire suppression system that Miss Delacroix had installed last week." Water suddenly erupted from ceiling sprinklers throughout the theater. Marcus cursed, realizing his escape plan was falling apart. "Now!" Fred shouted. What happened next was pure Mystery Inc. Chaos, carefully orchestrated chaos. Daphne had been preparing while Marcus was distracted. She released a rope she'd tied to the rafters, and a heavy sandbag swung across the stage like a pendulum, forcing Marcus to dive out of the way. Velma, who'd been sneaking around to the light booth, hit switches that made spotlights spin wildly, disorienting everyone on stage. Fred pulled a lever that activated one of the theater's old trapdoors, and Marcus fell through not far, just into a padded pit below stage level, designed for dramatic actor entrances. Meanwhile, Shaggy and Scooby, who'd been given one simple job to block the stage door to prevent escape, accomplished it in the most Shaggy and Scooby way possible. Shaggy accidentally triggered a rack of props that fell like dominoes, and Scooby, running from what he thought was a ghost, actually just his reflection, crashed into a rolling piano that wedged itself perfectly across the door. "Rory!" Scooby called out sheepishly. "No, Scooby, that was perfect." Fred laughed. Ms. Delacroix, freed from her estranged husband's threats, ran to help secure him. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was planning this. When he called and said he wanted to reconcile, I thought..." She stopped, tears in her eyes. "It's okay," Daphne said gently, putting a hand on the woman's shoulder. "You were hopeful. Hope isn't a bad thing, but it's a good lesson in financial relationships. Never mix personal feelings with business decisions. If someone has a history of financial irresponsibility or dishonesty, giving them access to your resources, even out of love, is risky." Police sirens wailed outside. Through the windows, they could see officers apprehending the men Marcus had hired to transport the stolen fortune. As Marcus was pulled from the trapdoor, Velma couldn't resist a teaching moment. "You know, Marcus, your biggest mistake wasn't just the crime. It was your understanding of value. You were so focused on the cash that you didn't consider the theater itself. What are you babbling about?" Marcus growled as officers handcuffed him. The theater, properly restored, would generate much more revenue over time than the hidden fortune. Velma explained. Let's do the math. Goldsworth's fortune is worth about $5 million today. Sounds like a lot, right? But a functioning performing arts center in this location could generate $500,000 annually in ticket sales, rentals, and concessions. Over 20 years, that's $10 million more than double the fortune. And that's not even counting property appreciation. She's right, Miss Delacroix said, understanding dawning in her eyes. I was so worried about the immediate financial crisis that I didn't fully appreciate the long-term value of what I was trying to build. Exactly, Daphne added. This is a crucial lesson in investment thinking. Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't in what is buried, but in what can be built. A performing arts center provides jobs, enriches the community, and generates sustainable income. That's worth more than any hidden treasure. Fred nodded. And if you'd just been patient, worked with legitimate investors, maybe scaled back the initial renovation plans to match your budget, I would have avoided this whole disaster, Miss Delacroix finished. Financial planning isn't just about having money. It's about managing expectations, timing, and not over-leveraging yourself. As Marcus was led away, still protesting, Shaggy raised his hand like a student in class. So, what happens to the fortune now? Good question, Velma said. Legally, it belongs to Goldsworth's estate. Since he had no heirs, it will likely be claimed by the state. But Miss Delacroix can petition the court. Since the fortune was hidden in her building and given her restoration plans, she might be able to argue for ownership, or at least a significant portion. But even better, Miss Delacroix said with a new determination in her voice, this publicity will help attract real investors. A mystery, a hidden fortune, a dramatic rescue. This is a story that will draw people to the theater. That's marketing gold. Now you're thinking like a true entrepreneur, Daphne said with an approving smile. But Scooby, sniffing around the stage, suddenly froze and started digging at a loose floorboard. Rook, rook. Beneath the board was a small metal box, and inside it, a letter in Cornelius Goldsworth's handwriting. Velma read it aloud. To whoever finds this, if you're reading this, I've either passed away or the theater is facing troubles. My fortune was never the point. The theater itself is the treasure, the joy it brought, the dreams it fostered, the community it built. But I understand that bills must be paid and dreams need funding. Use what you find in the vault to restore this place, not for personal gain. Make it live again. That's the only wealth worth having. A moment of respectful silence followed. Even the police officers stopped to listen. Wow, Shaggy said softly. That's actually really beautiful. And really wise, Velma added. Goldsworth understood something that many people forget. Money is a tool, not a goal. Its value comes from what you do with it. But their moment of reflection was interrupted by a new sound, not the phantom's mechanical laugh, but real laughter, coming from deeper in the theater. And footsteps. Running footsteps. Please tell me that's not another phantom. Shaggy groaned. The gang exchanged glances. The mystery wasn't quite over yet. There's someone else here, Fred said, his voice low and urgent. Everyone stay alert. The laughter genuine, almost giddy echoed from the direction of the basement where the vault was located. Velma's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. Of course, Marcus wasn't working alone, and I don't just mean those hired hands outside. Daphne was already moving toward the basement entrance, her determination overriding any fear. Let's finish this. As they descended the ladder once more, now with police officers following, they found the massive vault door standing open. Inside was a stunning sight. Walls lined with safety deposit boxes, several large chests, and shelves containing what appeared to be rare coins, bonds, and carefully preserved cash from different eras. But more stunning was the person standing among the treasure, filling a bag with bonds. Susan Price, one of the original partners, who was supposed to be in Europe. Susan Price? Velma called out. We thought you were overseas. The woman, elegant, in her 70s, but clearly spry, spun around, startled. For a moment, she looked like she might run, but then her shoulders slumped. I suppose I should have known the famous Mystery Inc. would figure it out. Though I'd hoped to be gone before you got this deep. You were the Phantom too? Fred asked, confused. No, Susan laughed bitterly. That was all Marcus, the fool. I was working quietly, carefully. I've been coming here for weeks, slowly working on this vault during the night. I almost had it open when Marcus started his ridiculous scare tactics. Nearly ruined everything. Miss Delacroix, who'd followed them down, gasped. You knew each other? Old family friend, Susan said. Robert Marcus's father contacted me before he died, told me about Cornelius's hidden fortune. We'd always wondered what happened to it. When Marcus inherited his father's papers, he found hints about the vault. He contacted me, but you decided to work independently, Velma concluded. Let Marcus take all the risk while you slipped in and out unnoticed. Precisely. Susan smiled without humor. I'm old, dear, not stupid. Why face arson and assault charges when I could just claim I was here investigating my former investment? Shaggy scratched his head. But like, you were a partner. Don't you have some claim to the money anyway? An excellent question, Velma said. Susan, you sold your share to Goldsworth in 1994. I saw the records. You accepted a buyout. Susan's face darkened. A buyout that Cornelius pressured me into accepting. He knew I needed money fast. My mother was ill, needed expensive care. That's awful, Daphne said sympathetically. But it's still not legal justification for theft. If Goldsworth took advantage of your desperation, that's unethical. But you still entered into a contract. Ethics? Susan's voice rose. Let me tell you about ethics. Cornelius Goldsworth was a financial bully. He underpaid performers, overcharged patrons, and systematically pushed out anyone who challenged him. He built this fortune, she gestured at the vault as contents, on the backs of people he exploited. Rexploited? Scooby asked, tilting his head. Velma sighed. Exploitation means taking unfair advantage of people, Scooby. And if what Susan says is true, Goldsworth wasn't the wise businessman his letter suggested. He was a predatory one. But does that make stealing from him right? Daphne challenged. But does that make stealing from him right? Daphne challenged. Two wrongs don't make a right, especially financially. If Goldsworth cheated you, there were legal avenues, lawsuits, mediation, regulatory complaints. Susan laughed harshly. Easy to say when you're young and idealistic. Do you know how expensive lawyers are? How long court cases take? I made a choice 30 years ago based on my circumstances. Now I'm making another choice. But here's what you're missing, Velma said, stepping closer. The lesson in all of this isn't about who deserves what. It's about the cycle of poor financial decisions. Goldsworth made bad choices, hoarding money, exploiting partners, refusing to trust financial institutions. Those choices led to paranoia, broken relationships, and ultimately, his fortune being hidden away where it couldn't do anyone any good, including him. Marcus made bad choices too, Fred added. Instead of building his own wealth legitimately, he focused on what he thought he was owed, spending resources on an elaborate criminal scheme that's now destroyed his life. And you're making the same mistake, Daphne said gently but firmly to Susan. Instead of using your experience and knowledge to build something new, you're stealing from the past. You're risking your freedom, your reputation, and your legacy for money that won't actually solve your problems. Susan's hands trembled slightly as she held the bag of bonds. You don't understand. I'm 73 years old. I have medical bills, debt from bad investments I made, trying to recover what I lost. This money could secure my retirement, maybe leave something for my grandchildren. Bad investments? Velma picked up on the detail. What kind of investments? Susan sighed, and for the first time, she looked her age-tired, defeated. After I sold my share, I tried to make the money grow quickly. I invested in speculative stocks, a restaurant that failed, a real estate scheme that turned out to be a scam. Within 5 years, I'd lost everything. I've been struggling ever since. That's a crucial lesson right there, Velma said, her voice softer now. When people come into sudden money, whether through a buyout, inheritance, or even lottery winnings, the temptation is to make it grow fast. But fast growth usually means high risk. The investors who build lasting wealth do it slowly, through diversified, boring investments like index funds, bonds, and real estate in stable markets. Shaggy raised his hand. Like, what's an index fund? It's a type of investment that spreads your money across hundreds of different companies, Velma explained. Instead of betting everything on one company's success, you're betting on the overall growth of the economy. It's safer, steadier, and historically, it grows about 7 to 10% per year on average. If you put that $50,000 into a simple index fund in 1994, Daphne calculated quickly on her phone, it would be worth approximately $380,000 today, even without adding another penny. That's not the $200,000 you think you were owed, but it would have grown to far more than that amount through compound interest. Susan stared at them, the reality sinking in. I didn't know. I thought I had to be clever to make sophisticated investments. That's a common misconception, Velma said. The wealthy often stay wealthy not through clever schemes, but through patient, consistent, boring financial habits, spending less than they earn, investing the difference, avoiding debt, and letting time do the work. A police officer stepped forward to take Susan into custody, but she held up a hand. Wait, please, let me say something first. She looked at Ms. Delacroix. Helen, I'm sorry. You're trying to do something good with this theater, and I nearly ruined it. The truth is, I've spent 30 years bitter about the past, and it's poisoned everything I've touched. That's the real theft, not what Cornelius took from me, but what I took from myself by refusing to move forward. Miss Delacroix's eyes were wet with tears. Thank you for saying that. As officers led Susan away gently, her age and confession earning her some dignity, the gang stood in the vault, surrounded by the fortune that had caused so much trouble. So what happens now? Shaggy asked. Like, does Miss Delacroix get the money? That's up to the courts, Fred said. But given Goldsworth's letter and Miss Delacroix's restoration plans, she has a strong case. Suddenly, Scooby started barking excitedly, pawing at one of the chests. When they opened it, they found not money, but documents, deeds, stock certificates, and bonds that were still active. Velma rifled through them, her eyes widening. These aren't just old stocks. Many of these companies still exist. Some have split multiple times. If these are authentic, double quotes, she calculated quickly. This could be worth substantially more than $5 million, maybe 15 to 20 million. $20 million? Scooby's eyes bulged. But there was more. At the bottom of the chest was a final letter from Goldsworth, dated just before his disappearance. I've made many mistakes. I pushed away partners who trusted me. I chose fear over faith, control over collaboration. This fortune represents every wrong choice I made. But maybe it can fund right choices for someone else. To whoever finds this, invest in people, not just profits. Build community, not just wealth. That's the secret I learned too late. Daphne wiped her eyes. He figured it out in the end. The ultimate financial lesson, Velma said. Wealth without purpose, without positive impact, is just numbers in a vault. Real prosperity comes from what you build, what you share, and what you leave behind. Miss Delacroix looked around the vault, then at the gang, her expression determined. If the courts award this to me, I know what I'll do. Part will restore the theater, of course. But I'll also set up a fund scholarships for performing arts students, financial literacy programs for the community, support for local artists. Goldsworth wanted the theater to be a treasure. I'll make sure his fortune creates lasting value. Now that's a good investment, Fred said with an approving nod. They began ascending from the vault, but as they reached the main floor, they heard footsteps again, this time rapid and panicked. "Oh no," Shaggy groaned. "Like, what now? Is there a third phantom?" A figure burst through the stage door, breathing hard. It was a young woman in her 20s, with wild hair and paint-stained clothes. She skidded to a stop when she saw the group and the police officers. "Is it true?" she gasped. "Is the theater saved? Because if it's not, I just quit my job and maxed out my credit card for nothing." "Who are you?" Miss Delacroix asked, confused. "Sorry, I'm Amy Chun, Margaret Chun's granddaughter. I just found out about the theater situation from the news. My grandmother always said this place was special. I'm a set designer, and I thought—" She stopped, suddenly embarrassed. "This sounds crazy. I thought I could help with the restoration. I have ideas, a portfolio, and a lot of enthusiasm." Velma's eyes lit up with recognition. "Chun, Margaret Chun was one of the original partners. She was. And unlike the others, she always spoke fondly of this place and what it represented. When she died, she left me her journals about the theater, the shows, the dreams, the community it built." Amy pulled out her phone, showing designs and sketches. "I've been planning this for years, hoping someone would restore it. I know I should have reached out properly, but when I saw the news about the fire and the phantom, I was afraid I'd lose my chance." Miss Delacroix looked at the young woman's designs, and a smile spread across her face. "These are brilliant. The mix of classic and modern, the community spaces, the flexible staging." She looked up. "How would you feel about being the theater's first official employee?" "Serious?" Amy's face lit up like a spotlight. "But I quit my job. I have debt." "This is a huge risk." "Calculated risk," Daphne corrected with a smile. "You have skills, passion, and a plan. That's not reckless. That's entrepreneurial. Just make sure you negotiate a fair salary and benefits, and create an emergency fund from your first paychecks," Velma added. 3 to 6 months of expenses saved before you make any major purchases. That way, if something goes wrong, you have a buffer. Emergency fund, right?" Amy said, nodding eagerly and making notes on her phone. "What else? I'm terrible with money. Pay off high-interest debt first, especially that maxed credit card," Fred suggested. "Credit card interest rates are brutal, often 15 to 20% or higher. That's wealth destruction, not wealth building. Start a retirement account, even if you can only contribute a little," Daphne added. "Time is your greatest asset when you're young. Money invested in your 20s has decades to grow. And live below your means," Velma concluded. "Just because you get a salary doesn't mean you have to spend it all. The gap between what you earn and what you spend is where wealth is built." Shaggy, who'd been listening intently, raised his hand. "Like, all this financial stuff makes sense, but isn't it also about balance? I mean, Scooby and I like to enjoy our sandwiches now, not just save all our Scooby snacks for later." "Exactly right, Shaggy." Velma beamed. "Financial wisdom isn't about never spending or never enjoying life. It's about conscious choices. Spend on what truly brings you joy and value. Save and invest for future security, and avoid waste on things that don't matter to you. That's the balance." "Rhea," Scooby agreed, nodding sagely. "Rollins." As dawn broke over the city, the gang stood with Miss Delacroix and Amy outside the theater, watching the sunrise paint the building's facade in golden light. Despite the smoke damage and wear, it suddenly looked hopeful again, like a phoenix about to rise. "You know," Miss Delacroix said softly, "this whole experience taught me something. I was so focused on the financial crisis, so stressed about money and timelines, that I forgot why I wanted to save this place. It's not about profit margins or property values. It's about creating something meaningful. But the profit margins matter too," Daphne said with a gentle smile. The most sustainable businesses are the ones that do good and make money. Purpose and profit aren't opposites. They're partners, like the original five were supposed to be. Speaking of partnerships, Fred said, you might want to structure this new venture carefully. Maybe a non-profit for the community programs, but a separate for-profit entity for the commercial events. That could maximize both impact and sustainability. And please, Velma added, hire a good accountant. Not an expensive one necessarily, but one who's ethical and experienced with performing arts venues. They'll save you more money than they cost. Amy was frantically taking notes. This is better than any business class I took in college. Real-world experience is the best teacher, Fred agreed. But take some classes too: accounting, business management, maybe even basic economics. Knowledge is an investment that pays dividends forever. As they prepared to leave, Scooby and Shaggy were investigating the theater's old concession stand one more time. Like, Scoob, check it out. The popcorn machine still works. Shaggy had somehow gotten it operational, and the smell of fresh popcorn filled the air. Popcorn! Scooby cheered, and they began filling bags with the salty, buttery treat. Some things never change, Daphne laughed. But as they munched away, Shaggy noticed something odd about the popcorn machine, a hidden compartment underneath. Inside was one more envelope, addressed simply, to the finder. Velma opened it carefully. Inside was a single stock certificate for a company called Grandeur Entertainment Holdings, dated 1995. Made out to bearer, meaning whoever held it owned it. And attached was a note. This company was my dream, to expand the theater into a chain of community performing arts centers. I never had the courage to pursue it. Maybe you will. The company exists only on paper, but the dream is real. Build it, and build it right. C.G. Ms. Delacroix stared at the certificate. He left a blueprint for exactly what I wanted to do. A network of theaters, all supporting each other, sharing resources. That's brilliant business structure, Velma said. Economies of scale, shared marketing, bulk purchasing power for supplies, but each location serving its own community. It could work. It could be huge, Amy added, her designer's mind already imagining the possibilities. But start small, Fred cautioned. Get this one theater successful first. Prove the concept. Then expand gradually. Sustainable growth is always better than explosive growth that can't be maintained. Miss Delacroix nodded, folding the certificate carefully, one step at a time. First, restore the grandeur. Then, we'll see what the future holds. As Mystery Inc. piled into their van, tired but satisfied, they waved goodbye to Ms. Delacroix and Amy, who were already deep in conversation about restoration plans. Another mystery solved, Fred declared, starting the engine. And another lesson learned, Velma added. The real treasure is never the money itself. It's what you do with it. And friends, Shaggy added. And food. Speaking of which, like, where are we eating breakfast? Reekfast, Scooby echoed enthusiastically. Daphne smiled, looking back at the theater one last time as they drove away. You know what? I think this might be my favorite mystery yet. We didn't just catch criminals. We helped create something positive. That's the best kind of solving, Fred agreed. As the mystery machine disappeared down the street, the sun fully rose over the Grandeur Theater, illuminating its facade and casting away the shadows. Inside, the vault stood open, but no longer hidden. The fortune would fund dreams, not feed greed. And the theater, once a monument to one man's paranoia, would become a testament to community, collaboration, and the real meaning of wealth. And somewhere, perhaps, Cornelius Goldsworth's spirit could finally rest, knowing his mistakes had been transformed into opportunities, and his treasures would create not just profit, but purpose. The end. Or perhaps the beginning. 3 months later, Mystery Inc. received a special invitation hand-delivered by Amy Chun herself, who'd driven to their town specifically to give it to them. The Grandeur Theater's grand reopening. Daphne read excitedly, holding the elegant invitation card. Ms. Delacroix wants us to be guests of honor. Roosts of Roner. Scooby barked happily, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Like, does being a guest of honor come with free snacks? Shaggy asked hopefully. Amy laughed. All the concessions stand food you can eat, Shaggy. Ms. Delacroix insisted. She says you've earned lifetime free popcorn. Best mystery ever, Shaggy declared solemnly. On the night of the reopening, the gang arrived to find the theater transformed. The facade had been cleaned and restored, the marquee rebuilt and glowing with warm lights. A red carpet led to the entrance, and people from all over the community were streaming in families. Students, elderly couples, artists, business people, a true cross-section of the city. Inside was even more impressive. The crystal chandeliers had been restored to their original brilliance, the seats reupholstered in rich burgundy velvet, and the stage rebuilt with state-of-the-art lighting and sound systems that somehow didn't detract from the classical architecture. But what struck the gang most was the diversity of what was happening. In the main theater, a youth orchestra was preparing to perform. In smaller side rooms, there were art classes, a financial literacy workshop for teens, and a community meeting space where local entrepreneurs were networking. Miss Delacroix greeted them personally, looking radiant in an elegant gown. Welcome. I can't thank you enough. Without you, none of this would exist. It looks amazing, Fred said, genuinely impressed. How did you manage all this in just 3 months? Very careful financial planning, she replied with a knowing smile. After we secured the fortune, the court ruled in favor of the theater's restoration. As Goldsworth's letter indicated, I didn't rush to spend it all. I created a detailed budget, hired consultants, got multiple bids for every job. And most importantly, I kept a substantial emergency fund. Smart. Velma approved. What percentage did you reserve? 20% of the total, Ms. Delacroix answered. About $4 million in a high-yield savings account, untouched. The rest was divided. $6 million for renovations, $3 million for an endowment fund whose interest will support operations, and the remaining funds for initial programming and marketing. An endowment fund. Daphne clapped her hands. That's brilliant. It provides sustainable income without depleting the principal. Exactly. We calculated that the interest from $3 million roughly $120,000 to $150,000 annually, combined with ticket sales and rentals, will make us self-sustaining within 2 years. After that, we'll be profitable. Amy joined them, practically bouncing with excitement. And we're already getting booking requests for months ahead. Corporate events, weddings, concerts, theater productions. Everyone wants to be part of the theater with the secret fortune story. That's excellent marketing, Fred noted. You turned a crisis into a brand. With some help from a certain group of mystery solvers, Miss Delacroix said warmly. The media loved the story teenagers solving a mystery, exposing criminals, saving a historical landmark, and teaching financial literacy lessons. The publicity has been invaluable. Velma adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. Speaking of financial literacy, I noticed you have a workshop happening right now. Tell us about that. Ms. Delacroix's eyes lit up. That's perhaps what I'm most proud of. We partner with local banks, credit unions, and financial advisors to offer free financial education programs. We teach everything from basic budgeting to investment strategies, specifically targeting underserved communities who often don't have access to this knowledge. Knowledge is wealth, Velma quoted approvingly. Exactly, and we make it fun. We use theater techniques, storytelling, role-playing, interactive games. People learn about compound interest by calculating how a fictional character's savings grow. They learn about debt by playing out scenarios. It's engaging and memorable. That's genius, Daphne said. Financial education doesn't have to be boring lectures. A young teenager approached shyly, holding a program. "Excuse me, are you Mystery Inc.? The ones who saved the theater?" "That's us," Fred said with a friendly smile. "I just wanted to say thank you. I'm in the youth orchestra," she gestured toward the stage. "And without this place, we wouldn't have anywhere to practice or perform. My family can't afford private lessons, but the theater offers them for free through their scholarship fund. I'm learning violin, and someday I want to study music in college." "That's wonderful," Daphne said warmly, "and a perfect example of how investing in community creates value that can't be measured just in dollars." The girl smiled and hurried back to her orchestra, but her words had touched them all. "See?" Miss Delacroix said softly. "That's the real treasure Goldsworth left behind, the opportunity to change lives. His money is just a tool. The theater and its programs are the actual wealth." As they found their seats for the opening performance, Shaggy leaned over to Velma. "So, I've been thinking about all those money lessons. I actually started a savings account." "Shaggy, that's fantastic." Velma beamed. "How much are you saving?" "Well, I figured out that I spend about $50 a week on snacks. So I decided to cut back to $40 and save the other 10. That's $520 a year. And if I invested ... He pulled out his phone, showing a compound interest calculator app. "In 30 years at 7% return, it'll be worth over $50,000. Shaggy, I'm so proud of you." Velma hugged him. "That's exactly right. Small, consistent savings over time creates substantial wealth. You've learned the most important lesson." "Rhea," Scooby added, then pulled out his own phone. "Rook, Rhea have ravings too." Scooby showed them a dog treat savings jar on his phone app, a special account where he was depositing Scooby snack credits to save up for a really big Scooby snack later. "Scooby's learning delayed gratification," Daphne laughed. "The ability to save today for bigger rewards tomorrow. That's a cornerstone of financial success." The lights dimmed, and the curtain rose on the orchestra's performance. As beautiful music filled the restored theater, the gang sat back, content. But during intermission, they were approached by a distinguished-looking older man in a wheelchair, Thomas Bishop, the last surviving original partner, whom they thought was unreachable in his Florida nursing home. "I had to come," he said, his voice weak but determined. "When I heard what happened, what you kids did, I had to see it for myself." "Mr. Bishop," Miss Delacroix said, rushing over. "I tried to contact you. I know. I'm old and stubborn." He smiled. "But I wanted to give you something." He handed her an envelope. "These are my original shares of the theater partnership, signed over to you. I never sold them to Cornelius. I just walked away when the fighting got too bad. But they're legally still valid." Ms. Delacroix opened the envelope with shaking hands. "Mr. Bishop, this is incredibly generous. These shares could be worth more than I need at my age," he interrupted. "Use them to secure the theater's future. Maybe establish a perpetual trust so it can never be sold or demolished. That's what it should have been from the start. Not owned by one person, but held in trust for the community. A trust structure." Velma exclaimed. "That's brilliant. It removes personal profit motivation and ensures the theater serves its mission in perpetuity." "Exactly." Thomas smiled at her. "You're a sharp one. Cornelius was sharp too, but he was smart about the wrong things. He knew how to make money, but not how to make meaning. In the end, what does it matter how much you accumulate if it just sits in a vault? What matters is impact," Daphne said thoughtfully. "The lives touched, the opportunities created, the joy spread. And that," Thomas said, gesturing around the theater, "is worth more than all of Goldsworth's fortune combined. This is prosperity, not the money, but what it built." After the performance ended to thunderous applause, the gang gathered on stage for a photo with Ms. Delacroix, Amy, and the young musicians. But before they could leave, Velma asked if she could address the audience. "I promise to be brief," she said, stepping to the microphone. "This mystery taught us many lessons, but I want to share the most important ones with all of you, especially the young people here tonight." The audience settled, attentive. First, money is a tool, not a goal. Goldsworth made the mistake of hoarding wealth instead of using it. Don't work just to accumulate. Work to create value and impact. Second, invest in yourself. Education, skills, health, these are investments that pay returns throughout your life. Amy here quit her job to pursue her passion, but she did it with skills and a plan. That's smart risk-taking. Third, start saving early and consistently. Shaggy and Scooby have started saving just $10 a week each. It seems small, but over decades, it becomes substantial. Time is your greatest financial asset when you're young. Fourth, avoid debt, especially high-interest debt. Credit cards, payday loans, and other expensive borrowing can trap you in a cycle that's hard to escape. If you must borrow, understand the terms and have a repayment plan. Fifth, diversify. Never put all your eggs in one basket, whether that's a job, an investment, or a business venture. Spread your risk, and you'll be more resilient to life's uncertainties. Sixth, live below your means. The gap between what you earn and what you spend is where wealth is built. You don't have to be miserly, but be intentional about spending. Seventh, invest in community. The strongest financial safety net isn't just your personal savings, it's the relationships and community you build. People who help each other weather financial storms better than those who go it alone. And finally, remember that true prosperity isn't measured by your bank account. It's measured by your relationships, your health, your purpose, and the positive impact you have on the world. Money can support those things, but it can't replace them. The audience erupted in applause, and the gang noticed that many people, young and old, were taking notes or recording on their phones. As they finally made their way to the mystery machine hours later, stuffed with popcorn and theater snacks, Shaggy turned to the group. "You know, like when we started this mystery, I thought it was just about finding hidden money. But it turned out to be about so much more." "Like what, Shaggy?" Daphne asked. "Like what money really means, I guess. It's not just paper or numbers. It's like choices and opportunities and the stuff you can build or help with." "That's pretty deep, man." "That is deep, Shaggy," Fred agreed, impressed. "Rhea." "Very deep," Scooby nodded sagely. As they drove away from the brightly lit theater, Velma looked back one more time. "You know what makes me happiest about this mystery?" "What?" the others chorused. "No one really lost. Marcus and Susan are facing consequences, yes, but they're getting therapy and education in prison. They have a chance to change. Miss Delacroix got her theater and learned sustainable business practices. Amy found her dream job. The community gained a cultural center. And Goldsworth's fortune is creating the legacy he hoped for at the end. Everyone got what they needed, even if it wasn't exactly what they thought they wanted. That's the best kind of ending," Daphne agreed. "Speaking of endings," Fred said with a grin, "anyone up for solving another mystery? I just got a call about a haunted bank where money keeps disappearing from the vaults, ... double quotes. "Bank?" Shaggy yelped. "Like, can it be a haunted pizza parlor or something?" "Ro-Ray." Scooby shook his head vigorously. But even as they protested, they were already turning the van toward their next adventure, ready to solve another mystery and learn another lesson. Because that's what they did, Mystery Inc. Teaching prosperity one mystery at a time.